Welcome to Love in Life, a guide to a positive mindset. My aim is to show you that the key to a happier and more positive mind is to love the life you have. We will look at tips and tools you can use to improve your mindset, and the best thing is, we'll all be on this journey together. Welcome back to Love in Life. I hope you're well. Just a quick warning, Hugo sat right next to me today. I'm sat sort of snuggled up on the sofa because I'm cold, and Hugo is snuggled up next to me, curling into my blanket as much as he possibly can. So if you hear any snoring, then that's what it is. I'm sure you're used to it by now. So how has your week been? It's been a week of extreme ups and downs for me, if I'm honest. End of last week, I had an amazing session with a new client who, she's just so ready to work with me. She is so ready to make a change, and knowing that we're going to be working together for the next few months is just so special, because I'm really excited to see how things progress for her and how things transform in her life. So I'm so excited about that. So that was how my week, since I last spoke to you, that was how my week started. And then Alfie, my eldest, he went to Dubai on Friday as part of a rugby tour with the school. So absolutely amazing opportunity for him. But knowing my son is practically on the other side of the world, a bit of an exaggeration, I know, from UK to Dubai. It's not quite the other side of the world, but, you know, it's far enough for me. The first time he's got on a plane without either me or Craig, I found it really, really emotional. And that was really enhanced by my hormones as well. I spent quite a few days just crying and feeling like I've lost something. Very, very strange. I'm sure many of you will resonate with this. Whether you've got children or not, I think hormones have a massive, massive impact on how we feel about things and how we deal with things. And what I want to talk to you about today is menopause, because on the day of recording this, it's Menopause Awareness Day. And I know last week I did an episode on World Mental Health Day. So I guess it ties in quite nicely with World Mental Health Day, because, you know, I talked a lot about last week about how it affects our mental health, how menopause and hormones in general, I guess, affect our mental health. So, today I just want to talk to you a bit more about menopause and what changes take place in our body. And it doesn't really matter what age you are and what stage you are at in your life cycle, because if you, like me, are in your early 40s and you are going through perimenopause, then you will 100% know what I'm talking about. If you've already gone through menopause, then you will know what I'm talking about. If you are in your 20s or early 30s, then you might think, what's the point in listening to this? But you need to know. It's really, really important that we raise awareness of what changes are going to take place in our lives, because this is inevitable. Everybody is going to go through this. Some people are going to go through it worse than others, but everybody is going to go through this. Every woman is going to go through this. And, you know, it's only been in the last few years that people have been really open and honest about talking about menopause. And I know when you know that somebody else is going through the same as you, it makes dealing with it so much easier. When you know what to expect, it makes it so much easier. So whatever age you are, please carry on listening, especially if you're one of my regular listeners. Please do carry on listening, whatever your circumstances. So, menopause, that fucker of a roller coaster that we all go through. What does it mean? So, you might be aware, I think I must have mentioned in past episodes that I took a menopause awareness course, just to raise my awareness, really, because of all the changes that I was going through. And if I'm able to pass on some of that knowledge to other people and help other people, because I learned a lot from doing that. And it's only a basic course, but I learned an awful lot from doing it. So, what is menopause? Well, you're said to be in menopause when you haven't had a period for 1 year, 12 months. The actual term menopause is that stage when you haven't had a period for a year. So actually, if you think you've got perimenopause, menopause and postmenopause, actually the menopause stage is probably the shortest of it all. Because you've got perimenopause, which is the build-up to menopause. So obviously this happens for at least 12 months because to be in menopause, you have to have, or, to be technically in menopause, you don't have a period for 12 months. So menopause can go on for many years, I'm afraid to say. I'm sure there are lucky women out there who don't perimenopause for years. Let me know if you're one of them. But perimenopause is the build-up. Perimenopause is when the changes start happening and you start to experience the symptoms. Menopause, as I said, is that stage when you haven't had a period for 12 months. And then you have postmenopause, which is obviously the period of time after menopause. So you have perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. During perimenopause, our ovaries start to slow down in the production of the sex hormones that are produced in women. And the main hormones that are produced are estrogen or estrogen, however you say it. I say estrogen. Sometimes it comes out estrogen, actually. We'll see what happens. Let's see how many times it changes throughout this episode. So estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And each of these three hormones are equally as important, and they each have different jobs. So let's go through what each of those jobs are. Okay, so estrogen is one of the main hormones, and it has so many different functions. But the main function of estrogen is to maintain our menstrual cycle. And there are 3 different types of estrogen, and we'll experience different types depending on where we are in our reproductive life. So the 3 types of estrogen are estradiol, which is the main and strongest form of estrogen. It's present during our reproductive years. And like I said, that is what maintains our menstrual cycle and encourages regularity. And then estriol is the type of estrogen that is created during pregnancy. Obviously, that has a completely different role because it doesn't need to maintain your menstrual cycle because you're pregnant. It needs to maintain your uterus for a safe place for your baby to grow. And then you've got estrone, which is the type of estrogen which is made following menopause, and it's the weakest of the 3 types of estrogen. Because it's a growth hormone, we've got estrogen receptors all throughout our body. So mainly predominantly in our sexual regions, but we also have them in our brain as well. Because estrogen plays a big part in our brain cognition. I mean, I'm no scientist, so I hope I'm explaining this well. But estrogen helps maintain memory and cognition. So as you can imagine, when there is a drop in estrogen, that's why we suffer from memory loss, brain fog. Estrogen also helps regulate our mood and our body temperature. So again, when there's fluctuations of estrogen levels in our body, so during menopause or during our periods, that's why we sometimes get cranky. That's why we suffer with hot flushes or raised temperature. But estrogen also protects your heart. It also stimulates bone growth and maintains bone strength. It lubricates the joints. Estrogen maintains the menstrual cycle, as I mentioned. It also lubricates the vagina and stimulates breast growth during puberty, as I mentioned. So, as you can imagine, the drop in estrogen causes dryness. That's what causes saggy boobs. When you get to a certain age and they're not as plump anymore, that's why. That's one reason why, I guess. Okay, so that's the role of estrogen. Progesterone. The main role of progesterone is to maintain and prepare the uterus for pregnancy. So if we think about our menstrual cycle, if you can imagine, the start of our menstrual cycle is shedding the lining of our uterus. So I'm sure you can imagine progesterone levels are usually at their lowest at this time. And then after ovulation, which is right smack bang in the middle of our cycle, progesterone levels usually peak after ovulation, because the main role of it is to prepare and maintain the uterus for pregnancy. So if an egg gets fertilized, then progesterone helps maintain the uterus for that egg to be implanted, to give it the best environment it possibly can if it's implanted. I hope that makes sense. And then it drops off. So that is the main role of progesterone. So as you can imagine, when we start reaching menopause years, progesterone is, in terms of our menstrual cycle, progesterone is the least needed hormone for our menstrual cycle, for our reproductive cycle, because the whole point of menopause is to prepare our bodies not to have babies anymore. So obviously that's the least one that's needed. However, estrogen and progesterone usually work alongside each other. They normally work in line with each other. But because progesterone is usually the first hormone to decrease, this normally means that even though our estrogen levels are lowering as well, they're not lowering quite as much as our progesterone. So actually we've got more estrogen in comparison to progesterone. Does that make sense? The levels aren't what they were before. And this is what causes irregular periods. This is what causes our cycles to be all over the place and become more unpredictable. The lack of progesterone, or the slowing down of production of progesterone, leaving us with more estrogen in comparison to progesterone is usually why we get our first symptom. One of the common first symptoms of perimenopause is weight gain, particularly around the stomach area. And this is because there is a misalignment with our progesterone and estrogen levels. Another role of progesterone is to help improve our mood. So with the lower levels during perimenopause, this can often lead to mood changes and anxiety, restlessness, trouble sleeping, and quite often headaches. And then finally, testosterone, the last hormone, which is affected by menopause, is known as the male hormone. And usually that's because one of its biggest jobs is libido. So as our testosterone levels drop, our libido drops. It also has an effect on memory, concentration. That also has an effect on our mood as well as progesterone. Testosterone also controls bone growth and muscle mass. So when we're experiencing a drop in testosterone, that's why it's particularly important. You've probably heard that one of the best things that you can do during perimenopause or during menopause, the menopause period, shall we say, in terms of exercise, is to weight train. And that is to improve our muscle mass, because as our testosterone levels drop, so does our muscle mass, so does our bone growth. And I did read somewhere once that we carry on producing testosterone for about 20 years after menopause. It's just that the levels decrease. So as we've discussed, during perimenopause, the three main hormones begin to drop. And that's when you start getting symptoms appear, because the role of those hormones is not being fulfilled. And I've already mentioned a few, but some really common symptoms of perimenopause are irregular periods. Sometimes they can be heavier, sometimes they are lighter. Is that opposite to heavier? Yeah, I guess so. Personally, I haven't found mine to be heavier. I'm the other way. But it does fluctuate. So there's no one way that people experience menopause. Hot flushes, night sweats, waking up in the night more, often due to needing a wee more, sometimes due to night sweats. Like obviously when you wake up lying in a puddle of sweat, it tends to be quite difficult to drop back off again. And another symptom is just generally not feeling yourself. And obviously that's because you've got all these changes going on in your body. Loss of concentration, forgetfulness. Obviously these equate to brain fog. Your libido is reduced, weight gain. Some people experience thinning hair and dry skin and brittle nails. And these things are usually due to the lack of estrogen. Those final three things that I mentioned then. I've got a shocking statistic here. 1 in 10 women, so that's 10% of women, say they feel the need to give up work during menopause due to the distressing symptoms. I find that really upsetting, really, really upsetting, because, changes in our life, changes in our body are causing us to not feel happy enough. They're causing us enough stress to want to give up work. And obviously, if you want to give up work for other reasons, then That's different. But I find it really sad that women start to lose their identity. They start to think that people don't understand them. They start to not understand themselves. It leads us to feeling anxious and sometimes depressed. And as I mentioned last week, when I talked about mental health, this is something that I regularly notice, is that women feel so anxious during perimenopause, so much so that it leads to some women not wanting to work anymore. It often leads to depression. And that obviously isn't the same for everybody. It's just something I notice and I keep seeing regularly. So I just want to focus on that anxiety for a bit. Because whilst anxiety is obviously a symptom of menopause, that anxiety is usually caused by another symptom of menopause. It's like a byproduct of another symptom. So what I want you to think about, if you're experiencing anxiety during menopause, I want you to think, what is causing your anxiety? And really think about that. Why are you feeling anxious? Is it because you're experiencing brain fog and memory loss? And is that causing you to be embarrassed? Is it causing you to lack in self-confidence? Is your anxiety being caused by sex in a relationship? And I think it's really important here to think about why. Why is that causing anxiety? Is it because it can be painful? Is it because you've got low libido? Is it because of dryness? And I think it's really, really important to really try and pinpoint why. Like, why is it causing you anxiety? What is it about that particular area? Whatever's causing your anxiety, what is it about that particular area? And just acknowledging that. So if it is painful sex, just pinpointing that, why that's giving you anxiety, can then allow you to move on to the next step of trying to figure out a solution or trying to make that part of your life easier. So is it something you can talk to your partner about? Is it something you can talk to a GP about? Is it something you can take supplements for? Oh my God, I'm really finding it really difficult to condense menopause into one episode here. Obviously, I just said, is it something you can take supplements for? Is it something you need to speak to your GP about? You know, there's so many different ways of working with menopause, and it really depends on what symptoms you have and the severity of them. So I think what I'll do, sorry, this is just like a thinking on the job here, but I think I'm going to break this episode down into different episodes. So please, I'd love some feedback, because I think today's episode, obviously we've talked a lot about hormones and the role of the hormones and what it means when those hormone levels drop. I haven't even really touched on, yes, I've touched on symptoms, but there are so friggin' many symptoms. I think each one deserves its own bloody episode, to be honest with you. So I don't know. Let me know if you are interested in me doing more episodes on menopause, and let me know if you're not. To be fair, because it's not gonna interest everybody. So anyway, what was I going to say? So we've talked about the different 3 types of hormones, what happens to your body. Well, I've touched upon what happens to your body. we've talked about anxiety. I wasn't going to mention ages, but I guess it's really important to talk about that. I shouldn't just assume that everybody knows what age it happens. So let's talk about that. Okay. So the average age, and I stress the word average here, the average age of a woman experiencing perimenopausal symptoms is 42. And the average, no, I'm not even going to use that word. Something I read is that perimenopause usually lasts between 2 and 6 years. This is utter bollocks. I'm sorry, but it is absolute rubbish. It can last 2 to 6 years. Amazing if yours only lasts 2 to 6 years. But I know from talking to my mum, this can last well over 10 to 15 years. And I don't say that to scare you, but we have to know, don't we? You know, if you read that it's only going to last 2 to 6 years, and then all of a sudden you go into your 7th year, your 8th year, your 9th year, and you think, what the fuck? I think it's good to know, to be prepared that it can go on. But please don't panic, because there are things you can do to help it. And we will go into that later on in further episodes. So the average age is 42. However, obviously, average doesn't mean usually. I started experiencing perimenopausal symptoms when I was 30, probably looking back, 37, maybe even 36. But 100% 38. That is when I had my test with the GP, when my hormone levels were inconsistent. They weren't consistent with menopause, but they certainly weren't consistent with perimenopause. I don't know. They certainly weren't normal levels, what they would expect to see for somebody who is not in perimenopause. So I saw that as my sign to just get on board with the fact that changes are beginning to happen. Obviously, changes were already beginning to happen, because that was what we made me have the blood test in the first place. They did offer to do my blood test again, but to be honest with you, I thought, what's the point? Some people might like to get confirmation from their doctor that they are 100% in perimenopause, but honestly, my view is, what is the point? I know it's happening. The quicker I get on board with it and work out how my body is changing, how my body is dealing with it, because we're all different, and how I want to deal with it, that's the most important thing to me. It doesn't really matter what a doctor tells me. So, it's really important to bear in mind, and this is why I urged, people in their 20s and 30s to carry on listening to this episode. It's really important to be mindful of what happens to our bodies due to the depletion of all of those 3 hormones that I mentioned. So obviously, all working together, especially like estrogen and testosterone, which really have a huge role to play in muscle mass, bone density, and things like that. As they all begin to weaken, as women, we have a higher risk of osteoporosis. And osteoporosis is when the bone density has reduced so much, they become more prone to fractures because they're fragile. Even if you don't hit the stage of osteoporosis, there's a stage before it gets to that point, which still means you've got less density in your bones. We can actually lose up to 20% bone mass. So it's really important to do what you can in earlier years. And don't worry, don't panic if you're post this point, because it's never too late to do something about it. But the earlier you can do it, the better, I guess. But to protect your bones, to protect your muscle mass. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, weight training, resistance training at the gym, or it doesn't have to be at the gym. You can do resistance training at home. You can use the weight of your own body to do resistance training at home, which just protects your bones and protects your muscles. It doesn't obviously have to just be weightlifting as well, but just weight bearing exercises such as walking, hiking, tennis, dancing, anything where you are supporting your body. Yoga, all these activities are amazing, not just for muscle, but for bone support as well. Obviously, there are vitamins and minerals which support bone and muscle growth, and vitamins, just very quickly, vitamins that help muscle mass are vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin E, magnesium, zinc. So if you can, whatever age you are, make sure you are mindful of incorporating these vitamins and minerals into your diet. Right, I think I'm going to leave it there for today because I'm super late getting this out there. But as I said earlier, if you've enjoyed listening to this introduction into menopause episode, then please do let me know. Let me know what you've enjoyed about it. Let me know if you want to hear any more about menopause, because we all go through it at some point. I'd love to know what topics you would like to hear about in order for me to structure some episodes. It's something I feel really passionate about, especially since really noticing how much the anxiety hits people, because none of us are born anxious, and there's no reason why that should become us. We all go through anxious periods, but it doesn't need to become us. Do you know what I mean? It's something I feel really, really passionately about. So yeah, please let me know if you've enjoyed this episode. Please share it with anybody who you think might benefit from it. I would really, really appreciate it. Even if it's, if you just take a selfie of you listening to my episode and post it in your stories, tag me in it, tag anybody who you think's going to be interested. Because like I say, we're all going to go through it. And sometimes if we're not prepared, well, I say sometimes, it can hit us like a fucking ton of bricks. So, and we're all in this together. So let's share what we know. If you want to get in touch, I'm going to pop my email address in the show notes. And yeah, please do ask me any questions that you've got. Pass on any feedback. Use my email address and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. And thank you for those of you who share my episodes and who tell their friends and family. I am sending you so much love and so much thanks, and I'll speak to you next week. Bye.